Stephen took Casey back to the courtyards where all the workers were once again lined up in 4 rows. While they were away, they equipped themselves with shovels, pickaxes, crowbars, and all sorts of destruction tools. "Men," Stephen began, putting his hand on Casey's shoulder, "I present to you my second-in-command, Casey Jr." "All hail Casey Jr.!" chorused the workers, raising their weapons high into the air. Now for some reason, Casey sort of liked having the MCS hailing him. If only they were on our side, he thought to himself. Things would have been a lot more easier for us. "Let us begin our takeover," continued Stephen. "We will begin with the destruction of the Model Engineer Society's railway line. Sections 3 and 4, you'll escort both myself and Mr. Jr. over to the extension area. There, we will begin the demolition." Casey knew the end had come for the railway, but what could he do? No ideas came to mind, and time was running out fast. But then, surprisingly, Stephen said, "Let us take the train over. We'll give it a send-off with a final train run." Casey looked round and saw Puffer being driven into the yards by the track he'd seen earlier. Both he, Stephen, and the workers boarded the carriage that was being towed. "As you can see, we've made use of your portable track," Stephen informed Casey. "We will use it to transport the scrap steel from the tracks so it could be melted down and used for making more of our powerful weapons. Then we will spread out throughout the lands and make every person around the area one of us." "I'm not sure I'm going to like this," Casey thought. "One last thing before you go, Stephen." The spirit appeared next to the carriage. "There's one bidding that still needs to be completed. Now, if my memory is correct, researchers say that the jewel has the capability of making departed spirits, like myself, become solid flesh once more. Would you care to give it a try?" Stephen thought about it, and agreed. He held the jewel before his grandfather's spirit. "Now, repeat what I say," the spirit said, before chanting a type of spell. Stephen listened carefully before repeating it in the same style. Casey stared from the coach, his eyes widened with amazement. As Stephen slowly chanted the spell, the jewel started to glow, to where fragments of light started to swirl out of it. They circled around the spirit, slowly at first before moving faster and faster. It was like watching a 1980s music video on the television. The lights then shot into the spirit, which lit its figure before everyone. The light then faded away and revealed Frank, alive. "Well done, my child," Frank said, smiling from ear to ear. He took the jewel from Stephen and handed it to the grinder. "Guard that jewel with your life," he said sharply. "I obey," Grinder replied, and turned away. Just as he turned, he tripped on a cable that was lying in his path. The fall sent the jewel flying out of his hand. "No!" cried Stephen as he leapt from the train and caught the jewel before it hit the ground. Casey watched closely from the train. "You clumsy idiot!" Stephen yelled as he checked the jewel for any damage. "Do you realize what damage you could have caused for me?" "Mainly for me," Frank said grimly. His ghastly eyes glared sinisterly down on Grinder. Stephen looked at his grandfather. A puzzled look fell upon his face. "What do you mean by mainly for you?" he asked. "Never you mind," Frank snapped, before snatching the jewel from Stephen's hands. "I'll take charge of the jewel and let you attend to what you are doing. Now, get on with it." Frank sat down in the chair with the jewel grasped tightly in his hand. Still looking quite unsure, Stephen reboarded the train and they set off towards the Model Engineer Society. As the train moved off, Frank turned to Grinder. "To make sure you don't cause any more trouble, you will join your colleague guarding the prisoners. Move!" Yes, sir. Right away, sir," Grinder said, as he ran towards the impound cages. "Take one last look, Casey," Stephen said as they passed the station yards. "This will be the last time you'll see this railway, and once it's all ripped up, the new empire will cover all its land." Puffer stopped at the start of the extension line to which the workers disembarked and lined up in front of Stephen with their destruction tools at the ready. "Men," Stephen announced, "what we're about to do will be a new page in the history of the Motorcar Society." "Surely to God he's not making another speech," muttered Casey to himself. "It is the time where you will fulfill your revenge on this miserable railway line." "He is, you know," Casey muttered again. "Prepare for the destruction!" All the workers arranged themselves on the first bit of track. Casey closed his eyes. This was something he dreaded to see. "Ready! End!" Stephen began. Then it happened. A few yards away from where they were, in the hidden siding, Lady Granger's steam pressure had slowly risen and had set off her safety valves. The noise echoed through the trees and reached Stephen's ears. "What is that?" he demanded. "Oh, that's just Lady Granger's safety valves blowing. It's just to let me know that she's ready to roll once more." Casey clasped his hands around his mouth. What did he just do? Stephen and the workers stared speechless at him. No brainwashed person would give railway details like that, unless... Stephen walked up so he was eye level of Casey and glared. "You were never brainwashed to begin with, were you, Casey?" he said quietly. No, not really," Casey replied. Slowly nodding his head understandingly, Stephen turned away. His hand reached out and grasped one of the pickaxes from the train. "Well, if brainwashing you doesn't get rid of you, then perhaps this will!" He swung round and lunged at Casey. Casey grabbed a nearby shovel and blocked the pickaxe from stabbing his head. The spike was just millimeters from his forehead. He threw Stephen back and jumped onto one of the coaches. Stephen lunged again, and the two were now swinging pickaxe and shoveling each other like a lightsaber duel. The coupling behind Puffer and the first coach broke, and the coaches started to gather speed down the gradient, with Stephen and Casey still fighting. "Follow and try to stop us!" yelled Stephen to the workers. Quickly, the workers ran down the road to the station, where they waited for the two to pass by. Faster and faster the coaches went, growing more speed every wheel turn. Stephen lunged time and time again at Casey with the pickaxe, but Casey was quick on his feet and dodged as many swings as he could. Then, without any warning, Casey swung his shovel and knocked the pickaxe out of Stephen's hand and into the line side. "Gah, you little brat!" Stephen growled as he quickly nursed his bleeding hands. "I'll kill you with my bare hands if I have to!" It was at that moment that Casey saw Lady Granger in her siding. "This is where I get off," he called to Stephen, and leapt just as Stephen took another dive and was left on the runaway coaches. "There's no time to lose," Casey said to himself as he leapt into Lady Granger's cab. "I'll have to break the rules for this one, for my friends' sake." Using the controls skillfully, Casey drove Lady Grange back to the MCS, avoiding any blocked paths from the workers. Stephen, on the other hand, was in a major panic as he raced through the wire mesh gates and into the courtyards. A sharp curve lay dead ahead in front of Bernard's petrol shed. "Oh no! Help!" yelled Stephen, and tried to reach for the guard's brake lever, but it was too late. The coach bounced and jeered as it flew off the curve and ploughed straight into the side of the shed. Frank, who was in the path of the coach, leapt to safety as the shed smashed to bits. When the noise died down, Stephen crawled out of the wreckage. His right leg was broken and his head was nearly cracked open. "Mercade," Frank said through clenched teeth. "What have you done?" "Casey Jr. wasn't brainwashed at all and ruined everything," Stephen whimpered as he slumped onto the remains of one of the coaches. Frank seethed with rage. "You stupid little brat! Just like your grandfather, always crying over your accidents like a pathetic child who wants his mummy. You make me sick. Pull yourself together and stop that boy from ruining my plans!" Stephen looked up from the droplets of blood streaming down his face and gnashed his teeth. "No," he said quietly. Frank retorted, "I said go and stop that boy! Move!" "And I said no!" Stephen snapped back. He stood up and tried to keep his balance on his still working foot. As far as I can see, this was not the paradise I was expecting. It's more like a lot of pain and suffering. And what's all this my plans? I did all the work for you from the very start, and I'm going to finish it once and for all. Now, for the last time, do my bidding or suffer the powerful effects of the jewel. I will never serve you or that useless piece of voodoo glass anymore. So be it." Frank pointed the jewel in front of Stephen and started chanting a very fatal spell. Just as he was halfway through it, Stephen grabbed a crowbar on the ground and threw it at Frank's hand. A direct hit. The jewel was knocked out of his hand and it smashed to pieces on the ground. An explosion of light erupted from the earth, knocking Stephen to the ground. "What have you done?" cried Frank. "I've got to get out of here, fast!" He made a dash for the gates, but the ground started to crumble. Cracks started to form in the earth, with blinding green lights beaming like spotlights. Stephen quickly ran for cover as another eruption took place. "This can't be happening," stammered Frank as he desperately tried to find a way out. He tried to leap over a large crack that had formed in the ground. Another beam of light stopped him halfway, which suspended him in mid-air. Swirls of green fog circled around him once more. The this became smouldering flames, which burnt through Frank's clothes and flesh, leaving nothing but a skeleton screaming in pain. Then it vanished as it instantly combusted, leaving the ashes to scatter wildly through the wind. Casey was now inside the Motorcar Society, with Lady Grange going twice her usual speed. He took no notice of the commotion nearby as he stopped Lady Grange by the impound cage. "What do you think's going on up there?" asked Cars. "I don't know, but I don't like the sound of it," replied Corpse.
"Shut it in there!"
yelled Grinder.
"Prisoners to speak
"When spoken to, yes, I think we got the picture by now," retorted Whitehouse.
"I'll have your heads for this, you two,"
growled Bernard. Casey tipped over to the cage's edge, making sure Grinder and Gears didn't see him. "Guys," he whispered sharply. The others were pleased to see him. "Why aren't you loose? I gave you the keys, didn't I?" They all looked over to Bernard, who just scowled. "Right, I'll have to think of some other way then," sighed Casey. Another bang sounded from above and shook the earth.
"The master must be in trouble. We must see what's happening,"
exclaimed Grinder.
"But what about the prisoners?"
Gears began.
"Leave them. They're not going anywhere. Now come on!"
The two hurried out of the room and up the pathway to the courtyards. Casey then noticed some spare chain lying nearby. An idea was developing in his brain, but he had to work fast. Quickly, Casey tied one end of the chain to the cage and the other end to Lady Grange's coupling. "Stand clear now," he called out to the others. But before he moved off, Casey did the most stupidest thing he could ever have done in this situation. He sounded the whistle. The noise echoed through the pathway, to which Grinder and Gears picked it up instantly.
"What the?"
exclaimed Gears.
"The prisoners! They're escaping! Why did you let us abandon our posts?"
shouted Grinder.
"But you said, never mind that! Hurry up!"
Skidding to a stop, Grinder and Gears raced back to the cage. Another rumble started. Bits of rock started to crumble in the roof. "Hurry, Casey!" called Jane, as bits of soil and stone started to fall from the roof. Lady Grange's wheels slipped on the damp rails as the chain tightened and creaked loudly. "Come on, old girl," Casey begged as he opened the regulator further and further. The train was just moving forward when Grinder and Gears raced in.
"Quick! Stop him!"
yelled Grinder, and he and Gears ran to the cage's side. As they got there, there came a loud groan, and the whole side of the cage collapsed on top of them as Casey pulled it free. "Quick, everyone, to the train!" ordered Casey, as he took Grinder's spare set of keys and started uncuffing everyone from the wall. An old coach was standing nearby, waiting to be cut up. Jane and Corpse quickly coupled it behind Lady Grange, while Cars and Whitehouse carried the unconscious bodies of Grinder and Gears over to the train. "Hold tight now," called Casey as he started the train on its way. They had just made it out when Corpse saw something flutter past him. He jumped off and ran after the object. "Corpse, get back here!" cried Cars. "Don't worry about me, I've just forgotten something," Corpse called back, and disappeared. Wheel turn by wheel turn, Lady Grange roared past the gates of the Motorcar Society. All the workers had evicted the society as soon as the trouble started. Once they were a safe distance, they all turned and looked at the destruction. The whole of the Motorcar Society was engulfed in a beam of green light, lighting up the night sky with its brightness. Then it went out with a final flash of white light, sending gusts of wind within a 1,000-yard radius of the club's land. And then there was silence. The seven looked up at the mass of broken bricks, rubble, and bits of metal that was once the Motorcar Society. The destruction of the jewel had passed. "Whoa, that was something," Casey said at last. "To think that a small jewel could cause so much destruction." "It was cursed to begin with," Cars explained. "I rang a museum after we found it, and they said that it was a jewel used by the now extinct worshippers of an unknown tribe. With it, they can bring back the dead and control them through the jewel itself." "Well, that explains the workers being brainwashed," Whitehouse said. "But what about when that ghostly figure said he could make us suffer more?" "Well, the jewel can drive a person insane with its power, even killing them. That's one part of the curse." "And the second?" asked Jane. "If the jewel is destroyed at some point, those who are brought back to life are instantly destroyed. If that person's soul had a good nature in its lifetime, then it's left to rest peacefully. Those who have an evil or criminal past is condemned to suffer, well, I hardly think what." A loud groan came from the train as Grinder and Gears came round. "Oh, what happened to me?" Grinder said, scratching his head. "One moment we're coming off a shift, the next moment we're right here. What happened?"
"Oh, I feel like a truck hit me," groaned Gears.
"You two have a lot of explaining to do," thundered Bernard, grabbing the two by the scruff of their necks. But sir," exclaimed Gears, "explain what?"
"Don't give me any more of that innocent crap! Get up there and get this place back the way it was!"
And with that, Bernard marched the now confused brothers up the path to the remains of their society. On their way, they rounded up the rest of the workers, who too were wondering what was going on. "So much for thanks for saving your life," huffed Casey. "Ah well, things never change." "Looks like Stephen will have to go back to the drawing board on this," said Whitehouse. "Where is he, by the way?" asked Jane. A series of weeping and sobbing soon answered that. Nearby, they found Stephen curled up behind a thorn bush, tears streaming down his blood-covered face. "How could I let this happen? It's all my fault," he wept. "There's no hope of you lot forgiving me for all the trouble I've caused." Jane knelt down and tried to wipe off some of the blood from his face. "We understand what you've been through, and know how dangerous that jewel was," Carr said slowly. "Since you first saw that jewel, you were instantly a victim of its power, but now it's destroyed, and you can do no harm anymore. True, you did lead us into a series of danger, but we all forgive you, since it wasn't your true self during that time." Stephen sobbed fresh tears once more. "Oh, you railway folk are too kind, too kind." "Case, I'm sorry for what I said earlier about not believing what you said," Whitehouse whispered. "Oh, forget about it," Casey smiled. "Just be glad you lot are all in one piece." "Thanks to you," said Cars. "You'll have a good word put in with the directors, I can assure that." Then Jane looked around. Someone was missing. "Where's Corpse? I can't see him anywhere," she asked. Then they remembered. They looked at each other, then back to the wreck of the MCS. Do you think he made it?" asked Casey. "I don't think even Corpse could escape something like that," Whitehouse answered. Casey turned angrily to Stephen. "See what your evil has done, Mercade!" he barked. "That's enough, Casey," Carr said. "It's no use getting all angry. I think it's probably best that we all hold a minute's silence in memory of our dear friend." The others agreed, and did so. Whilst this was happening, no one noticed a scruffy figure stumbling behind them. It noticed what the others were doing, and decided to join in. "It'll take a lot of sweeping up to get the place the way it was," it whispered to Cars. "Yes, indeed," whispered Cars. "I hope they recovered the body okay." "Whose body?" "Yours, Corpse." Then Cars paused. He looked up. "Corpse!" Sure enough, Corpse was standing there with them, tired and covered in scratches and bits of dirt. "Corpse, you indestructible smeghead!" exclaimed Whitehouse. "What were you thinking of, man?" "Well, I did say I'd forgotten something," Corpse began, "so I went back to get it." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "The deed!" exclaimed Cars joyfully. "We own the railway again! And just in time too! It's getting light." Sure enough, the morning sun was just peering through the trees and branches as the new day arrived. "Well, we better get some rest and get the line ready for the opening," yawned Cars. "I think a good breakfast is in order. What do you say, guys?" The others cheered and made their way back up to the railway. "Are you coming, Stephen?" asked Casey. Stephen was puzzled. You mean, you still want me to be here? After all Well, you did work extremely hard with the extension line and even got the MCS out of our hair for a while," said Whitehouse. "That is something we'd like to see from good workers like yourself. So, are you coming?" Stephen staggered to his feet. "Oh, please," he said, as Casey and Whitehouse helped him over to join the others. A week later, the extension line was completed. A big grand opening was held over by the engine sheds, with all the locomotives simmering quietly. They were all lined up on the extension line's points. The chairman stood up to the podium and addressed everyone. "Well, everyone, it has been a long wait," he said, "but after much saving and hard work, the new line is finished. And what has been told to me by Mr. Carson, I think it's appropriate to name this part of the line Mercade Pass." With that, he pulled a cloth that was covering a sign, which said Mercade Pass. Everyone applauded and Stephen just smiled. "You will be working here as a small promotion," informed Cars. "You will be our loop line signalman. What do you say?" "Oh, thank you," replied Stephen. "I've always wanted to be a signalman, and now I am." "And as for our member, Christopher Jones Jr., continued the chairman, myself and the directors have decided that his engine, Lady Grange, will be given a complete overhaul free of charge for his heroic efforts to save the line from the dreaded MCS, which will now be out of our path for some time." Everyone cheered and congratulated Casey. So, with no more ado, the chairman concluded, I declare our new extension line open for running. A chorus of cheers and whistles erupted from the crowd as one by one the cavalcade of engines paraded through the new line. Stephen now works on the new line as its signalman. He makes sure that all the trains are sent through on the right routes and makes sure that any accidents are avoided safely. And for the MCS? Well, they will return someday, as soon as things get back to normal with them. But between you and me, that won't be for a very, very long time.